Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. My name's Rebecca and I am here with Mr. Dante Ferrigno of Ferrigno Freedom.
It's good to see
So
everybody.
what we're going to kind of talk about today is kind of just finding peace on being a Christian and eating a carnivore diet. So Dante, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm just me. Nothing special, but I can say that apparently what carnivore diet has done for me has changed a lot of people's lives as well. It's definitely changed my life. I never really had a problem with eating meat from the beginning, but I've run into a lot of people in this carnivore community who are Christians that battle with some understanding of things. And when they hear things about cavemen and stuff like that, that it's a battle for them. And I figured we'd, like you mentioned, actually, when you asked me if we'd like to come talk about this, I thought, hey, it's an opportunity to talk about our faith some and also talk about what's done us so good as far as our health is concerned. So it's a great opportunity for that. But I mean, I have a background of basically doing everything. I mean, I've been a jack of all trades. I've been in sales. I've been in management. I've been in the healthcare industry. I've been in the electronics industry. I've been in the theater industry. So I've done a little bit of everything. And my degree is in history that I studied in school. I wanted to be a teacher at one time, but you get disillusioned about some things. So that's where I am with that. And I've found my calling sharing this information with people about the carnivore way of eating, in my case, specifically the lion diet, because it's been so good for me, which just means that I'm a little more strict on the type of animals that I eat because of their healthy nature of the way the animals process the food they eat and how their meat comes out as a result of that. But it doesn't mean I'm against a regular carnivore diet. I think it's great for a lot of people. Everything that we do as far as diet goes is probably going to be adjusted based on our needs and problems that we might be having because of the diet we're coming from. I've been doing the carnivore diet now for 3.5 years, and I never thought I was going to have a YouTube channel based on this. When I started doing this, I didn't know there was a carnivore community out there. I just stumbled on, I mean, I've been watching Jordan Peterson's videos for a while, and he was helping me figure some things out that I had some difficulty with, because like a lot of guys today, we're very confused about what our role is in the world. Everything seems to be very confused. And Jordan Peterson was doing a good job of helping a lot of guys get that straightened out. And I think some ladies too also, but I think the majority of his audience is male. And he was making a lot of sense to me. And it was nice to hear somebody in academia saying something that made sense rather than seem to be just coming from some other religion that wasn't a religion at all. I don't know how, if I put that in a way that makes sense, but he was just saying things that made good common sense to me. And then as he's kind of followed his faith, it's been an interesting journey to watch. But when he talked about what the carnivore diet, what lion diet did for him, it got my attention because I had been following medical advice on what to do about my gut problem, which at the time I didn't know exactly what to call it, but I call it leaky gut now. There is no real diagnosis from doctors for that, but it basically means that your gut is permeated, and it's usually caused by the lectins in vegetables. And I used to be big on eating a lot of spices, and I tried to eat what I thought was a good diet based on nutritional values. And I also ate a lot of junk food, just like everybody else does. We make our excuses for why we're going to eat ice cream and candy and whatever else we have, and whatever party we're doing or whatever event we're at with our church or our friends, that we're always eating things that we shouldn't eat. Alcohol was a part of my life, as most of my life, like a lot of people, I would say. And I also dabbled in things like marijuana and trying to find escapes for myself. I would say I had an addictive personality. A lot of people would say they probably do, if they're honest with themselves, that we get addicted to things easy that help us to escape from reality. And when I found this diet, it changed everything. It changed me physically. It changed my attitude toward all those things that I thought I needed to be able to get through life. And it's helped me to grow more spiritually too, because I've been a Christian most of my life. You probably wouldn't have known it to look at me and my actions before, but
Yeah.
this has been able to help me sharpen my walk of faith, to be able to let go of some of the things that my flesh wanted, because I thought, oh, I have the right to have those things. I started to realize it's not about whether or not I can do them, it's whether or not they're good for me. And it's just helped me in every way, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And for some reason, my story resonated with people early on, and it's grown into 71,000 subscribers as of today. And I'm glad
That's
I'm able
great.
to help people find better health physically and mentally and spiritually as a result of it.
Oh, I love that. I love that. A lot of people don't realize that this diet, it does seem to clear your head more,
Oh, yeah.
which is, it's definitely interesting because people are growing more in faith. I've actually heard some people say that they were liberal and became more conservative, and I was like, that's odd, but okay, if that works for you, yay, but it's very interesting that it seems to do these things, and I'm not sure how that works, but that's pretty cool too. So how long have you been a Christian? Like, when did you come to Christianity?
I always like to say I was born into it, because my family, ever since I was a little boy, I remember going to church and we were taught that this is the right way. And, I grew up in a non-denominational household. We focused on what the Bible said. And I knew all of the doctrines that I was taught. But like the prodigal son, I decided I wanted to go chase after what I wanted. I thought I got to go sow my wild oats. And that carried on a lot longer into adulthood than I'd like to admit. But I didn't really get serious about my faith changing my lifestyle until about 2010, when I had what you might call a mental breakdown, or an emotional breakdown of some kind. And once I got back to where I was looking and saying, all right, Lord, what you want from me? What am I here for? What's your need for me? And I started digging into the word, spending hours a day studying, usually 3 to 4 hours a day studying the scriptures and praying about it and trying to have that back and forth dialogue. A lot of times I remember doing a lot of praying, but not a lot of searching for what it was. I used to do a lot of listening to people teaching about what the Bible says, but not actually looking into it myself, not actually digging deeper and reading the scriptures and comparing notes on different people. And ever since then, I've found that this is the only thing in my life that has been solid throughout my life. It's the only thing that hasn't changed. I've grown in it, but it hasn't left me and made me feel like, oh, this is false, just like government has proven to be false to me over and over. And all of the things they told us we could count on are proving false over and over. All the establishments that we had in this country at one time that used to make a lot of sense, now I don't have faith in those things. I don't have faith in the alphabet soup of government letters we have anymore, because they're all run by men. And when power corrupts, it corrupts absolutely. And we're seeing a lot of corruption now. I look around and I'm literally amazed that we haven't devolved into riots in the streets, even though some areas there are riots in the streets.
Yeah.
I'm just thankful every day that God gives us the grace he's given us, considering how much it seems we've, as a people, turned our back on him.
Yeah.
But I think more and more people are also, especially Christians who probably were on a similar walk to me, where we're not doing the things that represent Christ,
Mhm.
which is what gives so many Christians a bad name, is they're just living their lives as sinful human beings and claiming to be Christ or Christians, not representing Christ the right way. But more and more people are starting to turn and say, all right, Lord, what is it? Because my way isn't working. The way the world told me everything works isn't working. And it's changed things.
Yeah, I've been there. My 20s were kind of blurry up until I met my husband, the early 20s, because I was in a sorority and there was a lot of drinking, there was a lot of drugs, and Yeah, I grew up also like you in a Christian family. My grandfather was a non-denominational preacher, and if he would have seen what I was doing, oh, good Lord, I'm so glad that he never found out. Yeah, bless his soul.
I feel
But
sorry for kids today because the cameras are on all the time. If I'd
all
have
the
had
time,
cameras on
I
back
am
then,
so oh, thank you, God. I am so glad that I grew up in the 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s where cameras were not everywhere. Like, because there's a lot of stuff I did that would have been social media'd and it would have been bad. So yeah, so I grew up too, and lost my way. And it wasn't until I was 31. I think was I 31? I was either 30 or 31. And it's like it just hit, like after having kids, the kids were little and it just kind of hit. And um that, whoa, I have to turn my life around. Like there has to be some sort of like change here. And I am super fortunate that my husband is extremely well versed. And he is the spiritual head of our household. He is the absolute head of our household. And I am one of those women that I do obey my husband. Um, but he also loves me like Christ loves the church. So, there's no abuse of power in that relationship. And, so I'm very grateful to him. He's amazing. Um, but yeah, so I kind of want to dig in a little bit to the meat of this because everybody's probably wondering when are they going to talk about it. So when are they going to get into the controversial subject? So I wanted to do this with you because I knew you were a Christian and you're very devout. And I I had asked you, do you want to do this? Because it really kind of just, I hear people talk about evolution and I hear people talk about ancestrally appropriate diets. And I just get that little twitch, that eye twitch, and I'm like, but that's not what I believe. And there's a little bit of turmoil that really kind of came in with it in the beginning that I had to start to really break down within myself and go back to the word and kind of dig into it and do some studying. And yeah, so I wanted to talk to you about that and kind of wanted to see what your thoughts, you know,
well, I want to start off
yeah.
by saying that I don't claim to be the authority on anything. As a matter of fact, the more I learn, the more I know that I don't know things. The more I dig into subjects, the more elusive the answer becomes most of the time, especially when it comes to anything involving history or sciences and so on. And when you start to say the science is settled on anything, that's when you stop learning. And that's what I think a lot of times we start to hear when it comes to these ancient man type of things, is that they've
Mhm.
already settled the science and it's not settled. But there's something I do want to say up front also. I listened to like what Dr. Chafee says. He had a video out called Unraveling the Truth, Ancestral Diets and Human Evolution. And he broke it down into several areas. And I would say about 90% of it I agree with. It's when he covers things like the fossil evidence and carnivore ancestors, because one of the problems with the fossil record is that paleontologists will look at the bones that are in there to come up with the dating, and then geologists will look at the layer that it's in to come up with the dating, and they're both basing their facts on something that it takes them in a circular type of logic where they're not really getting to the answer of what the date is. And I run into issues with people saying, well, what about carbon-14 dating? What about radio dating of things? When you start to look close at that, you start to find out that a lot of these scientists will say if it doesn't fit into our long years period, it doesn't fit into it being millions of years, then we have to reject that information. But so many times something can be checked for its age, and you can get one thing that says it's 22,000 years old and then another thing that says it's 2 million years old, and they're
Yeah.
doing the same tests, So they just reject the lower number and accept the higher number because that fits in with what they want it to fit in with. And that's when we're not doing science. You know, it's, by the way, I love science. I think science has wonderful things. The fact that you and I are talking from across the United States like this is thanks to science. Scientific process brought us to the point where we developed computers that can do the amazing things that they can do. We got cameras that can do amazing things. I mean, just in my lifetime, what a camera has gone into is just remarkable. So I'm thankful for scientific discovery, and I have respect for the scientific process. But when you start throwing out facts that don't match what you want it to match, you've thrown the scientific method out the window. And almost everything that deals with these really large numbers of years that are talked about, they're throwing out facts that they don't like. That makes it a version of faith in and of itself. So my biggest argument, I think, is, or not argument, but because I'm not looking to argue with anybody.
Yeah.
The thing that I'm trying to get at is that what I believe about how long man has been on the earth has to do with my faith in what God's word says. People who typically make the evolution origin theory argument have faith that what they believe is true also. But they'll say, no, it's based on science. But even when you push somebody like Richard Dawkins to the end of the origin theory concept, he comes back with the aliens seeded the earth type of thing. And it's like, well, that's circular logic again, because we've gotten right back to where we started. What was first, the chicken or the egg? Well, you said aliens did it. Well, now we got to figure out where the aliens came from. And if they were seeded on their planet by other aliens, we started over again. We got to go back and look at where that came from. So to say at some point that you get down to the evolutionary theory part being everything came from nothing. It was this small, originally when the Big Bang Theory was explained, it was this huge thing that exploded. Now I think it's down to something that's smaller than a neutron that exploded, and everything came out of that. And I think to myself, so all of this came from nothing, essentially. That to me takes a bigger step of faith than saying all of this intelligent design looking stuff, the stuff that we look at under a microscope that we have to study for years to understand, which makes it intelligent design. It makes it more fancy than even my Apple Watch or something else that I have that's technology wise. Just the wrist and the bones, the way the bones of my wrist work, it's miraculous in how they work. We're looking at them with science and saying, oh, this came from nothing. That is a bigger leap to me than saying God created us this way. God created trees that grow straight up and all of those things that we look at in creation and say it's miraculous when you just look at creation in and of itself. To me, that's a smaller leap of faith than saying we came from nothing.
Well, as a nurse, and I'm going back to school to be a nurse practitioner one day. Yay, pray for me because I need all the prayers I can get. But you look at the human body, and when you start breaking it down and seeing how everything works together and looking at even going down straight to the mitochondria and how it works and how the brain works and how fast and lightning fast everything is, it's really hard to look at that and not see an intelligent design, if that makes sense. And, it does. It takes an incredible leap of faith to believe that something came from nothing. And there's a law called the law of biogenesis. My husband told me about it. I absolutely cannot give you the whole spiel, but it basically says that life cannot come from non-life, and so it had to have been designed, at least, and that's what I believe, is that we were created and that the world was created. So it's hard to not see it in everyday life and everything we look at and see outside too. Like there's just too much that is perfect, and not and like it's beautiful chaos now, but it's beautiful and it's it's designed like just like an artist. It's the perfect artist designed the world, and that's how I feel personally.
Right. Well, that's you're getting to the fact that what we believe is creation by an intelligent being. In our case, we're saying God.
Yes.
Some people might say something different. They have different faiths, and I'm
Mhm.
not here to question what anybody believes. All I know is that I personally seek truth in everything,
Mhm.
and if I can't hammer away at what I believe is true, and it still be true when I'm done, then I have to reject that as being true. If
Exactly.
if I hammer away at something, in other words, I question my own beliefs. A lot of people don't question their beliefs because it's easier to stick with what you already have been raised up on. Like, say, for
Mhm.
instance, somebody who grew up preferring Coca-Cola over Pepsi. People will argue about that like it actually means something. Well, we do the
Yeah.
same thing in our faith side. Even though we don't understand what we actually believe sometimes, we still argue for it as if we do, because it's like a tribal mindset that we have that this is what my team says, so I'm going to stick with that. And when you're on a walk of faith, you have to be seeking the truth. And I believe that's what God is telling us in the Bible. See, a lot of people, I'm one of them. I used to read the Bible and I'd be like, I don't understand what this is saying. But it's usually because I'm looking for what can it do for me? What is this going to, how can this help me? This is like I'm looking for something for myself out of this. Whereas the only thing that I should want for myself is there truth to be found here? Is there
Mhm.
something that I can have that is solid in this world, as opposed to all these mushy concepts that we have to deal with? Especially these days, it seems like there's so many things out there that are designed to distract us and keep us confused, that I want something that's solid. And when I start digging into the word
Mhm.
and I'm looking for truth, the Bible says, seek ye the truth and you will find. Seek it and you will find it. You
Mhm.
have to be seeking that. What I find is, and this is from my own experience, is when I'm not finding the truth, it's because I'm seeking what I want the truth to be, not actually willing to say, whatever the truth is, I'm going to accept it, even if I don't like it.
Yes. Well, and a lot of people say that. I tell you, this is one that gets me. Is when I hear a lot of the carnivore people saying that we were designed to eat meat. And I am one of the rare carnivores that believes that no, actually we weren't. If you go all the way back to Genesis, you
Mhm.
know, if they were told to eat of the fruit of the fields, and they were to eat the plants. So we were literally designed to be vegans. So why should we not be vegans today? Well, the fall of man and sin came into the world, and I don't know how you feel about humanity. While there's some beauty in humanity, it feels like we tend to try to play God and destroy so much that we touch. Like looking at what our food system has become. Now we are like using industrial engine lubricants as oils for food, and
Yeah.
we are breeding fruits and vegetables to be bigger and sweeter, and we've genetically modified things. And I hate to throw out a company name, but Monsanto has something called contraceptive corn that they own. And I just feel like, you know, this is the way that we need to eat because it's one of the only things that we haven't completely destroyed. You
Mhm.
know, as a society, like meat is still meat. There are some meats that are better than others, but we've even destroyed seafood in a way because we've destroyed our oceans. So many fish, are toxic, because of high levels of mercury, or they have microplastics that we've created and ended up in the oceans in the meat, and now it's ending up in our arteries and our bodies. And I really, that's how I came, well, how I feel about it, and like how I rationalize it really in my mind. And because becoming a carnivore, because I'm about 95% carnivore. Your lion diet, I am carnivore-ish. I like the occasional crunchy water with glyphosate, which is what Dr. Berry calls lettuce. So it's like, I try to get organic, but it's like, but I can eat that and it doesn't hurt my joints. There's so many things that if I do eat, even chicken, I can't eat chicken because it hurts my joints. And it's like, it's the only thing that helps with my autoimmune issues. It's been it. This has been like, because mine don't have any treatment. My Sjogren's has no treatment that is good. And they don't do a lot of studies on it because it won't be profitable to them. It's the only thing that's helped. It's the only reason I'm upright. It's the only reason why I'm not in bed right now. And, my husband doing both my job and his job, so it's the only thing. And so that's where I'm at on that.
Well, as far as the evidence goes, the evidence is that I'm a lot healthier eating only meat than I ever was before. Do my numbers match what the doctors say would be healthy? No, it says that my cholesterol is a little bit high. I'm not a hyper responder, so I don't have really high cholesterol. But at the same time, most doctors would look at that and say, oh, your LDL was 109 on your last check. But then there's so much misinformation in there that it's hard for people to put it all together, because we've been told certain things about nutrition and medicine for so long that if you do any studying on history and you have any understanding that man makes decisions that are usually good for them and not necessarily good for everyone else. And when they're going to get funded for their studies by companies that want to sell grain and sugar and things like that, those studies are going to be skewed by those things. Then you start to realize, well, there's a possibility we could be being misled. And then when you start to look at the population and how they're affected by the diet that they have when they're following the food pyramid on large scale, like we are today, whether it's in schools, the military, hospitals, anywhere where the government is involved in what you eat in some way or another, they're following the guidelines that have been established pretty much since Ansel Keys came along and started talking about the heart health thing. And then we developed into the food pyramid, which had breads and grains, and they keep adding to the numbers of breads and grains that you want to have, but that's because they're being financed by these people who want to sell more breads and grains. It's a whole lot easier to raise that than it is to raise cattle. So, and you can make more profit on those things. So when you start to realize that you're being lied to about a lot of this stuff, it can be upsetting, because it's one of those things I was talking about earlier, where you thought you had something foundational that you could count on, but ultimately you've been lied to about nutrition for the last 50, 60, 70 years. And it's hard to accept that. People don't want to accept that they've been lied to about those things. But when I start to see the results of doing the opposite of what I've been told all my life, they told me, don't eat red meat, don't eat too much salt, and that eat plenty of bread. Now, I'm not eating any bread or any grains. I don't eat any fiber. I eat only red meat, and I eat a lot of salt, and I'm the healthiest I've ever been in my life. You can't help individually but say, what's the deal? And if I was the only one, it would be one thing, but I'm not the only one. And that's one of the reasons why I encourage people to come share their story on my channel as much as they can in these carnivore conversations, because the more people we have that are coming forward and telling their story of how their health has been affected by this, at some point, you don't have just anecdotal evidence. You have a study set once you have enough people that are doing this. And the problem when it comes to diet is that there's so many things that are left out of the control area, because people aren't, it's very easy not to tell the truth about what you actually ate, because you're ashamed of eating the things you shouldn't have eaten. Mm-hmm. And then people leave those things out. They don't even admit it to themselves that they're going off of the proper way of eating once they've decided, I'm not going to put anybody under the bus, but I've got family members who say, wow, even my doctors are telling me I should try a carnivore diet. I mean, specifically telling them that a carnivore diet would be good for their situation, or even a low carb diet, but then they don't do it. And then they say, well, it's not working for me. Well, it's not working because you had ice cream yesterday. So those things a lot of times throw off the numbers, and they can cause confusion for people. And
I laugh because I see that. I laugh because I see that. I've done that. Yeah. It's like,
And as much
but
as I
I've been
seek to
eating
say
a
that,
carnivore diet. But
yeah.
were you really? Like, what did you have yesterday? Well, I had a hamburger and I did have French fries. I had to have those French fries. That's not carnivore.
Mm-hmm. Well, even I myself, I try to always say what I know to be true. Sometimes I don't always talk about the things that I have eaten that I didn't want to eat, but I try to bring them up as much as I can on my channel. But if I go into it too much, it's like it just becomes fodder for vegans and whatever to attack me. Like, oh, see, he ate some fruit anyway, so he craves it. That means his body needs it, and so on and so forth. I'm like, no, I still crave marijuana and alcohol too, but my body doesn't need it. There's no doubt about that. So I have to tell myself no. And when you live, if I lived with people that drank a lot and had marijuana on a regular basis, you can pretty much guarantee with my addiction to those things, I would be doing them again occasionally, and they would take me in the wrong direction from what I want to do. Well, I live with people who still eat fruits and vegetables and processed foods that I've tried to convince them this is not good for you, but thankfully they've reduced the intake. But when I see it there's times where it's like, oh man, I could have an apple, right? An apple's fine. I know that what I've said about it though, I know that this apple has far more sugar than a natural apple would have. Even in my lifetime, apples have changed so much. I remember when I was growing up, they didn't have that super sweetness to them, but now they do. And I also remember a time when you could only buy them certain times a year. So that's changed in my lifetime. And it's hard for especially younger folks who have grown up with all of this stuff being available all the time. They can't wrap their mind around the worldview that this is not the natural way to do it, because it's natural for them now, but it's an unnatural foundation that they're building their understanding on. So my point of all that was, though, is it's difficult for people to say when they make the mistakes that they don't want to make. And I do my very best to say at any time that I do, and I know that I don't cover every single time that I do. But when I stick with it 100%, I do the best physically overall, and I can see the differences. So whenever I see people saying I failed at it, I can't help but question, did you really stick with it? I know how hard it is. And really, I don't even want people to answer the question, because it's too easy to say, yes, I did. I know I did. Even when you're telling you can hear it in your own mind. I didn't, but you won't admit it to yourself. I mean, self-deception is a real thing, and it's difficult to get around. But when you start really being serious with yourself, you'll find out that most of the time, anytime somebody fails on something like this, it's because they're not doing what they should be doing with it.
Exactly.
One thing I did want to segue into is the things that we agree on, though, with other carnivores like Dr. Chafee. I listened to him talk about things like our wisdom teeth fitting in our mouths in ancient man, but you don't have to go back thousands and thousands of years to see that. You just go back a couple hundred years, or even just go to modern indigenous tribes that eat a normal diet of a lot of meat. They don't have impacted teeth, and they don't have bunched together teeth. They don't have their wisdom teeth removed to be able to function. When you look at he talks about the Inuits and what goes on at the polar areas where there's not any vegetation for people to eat. There might be a little bit, but it wasn't enough to survive on. So they're eating a lot of meat, but they're healthy. They're healthier than we are in the United States and in other first world countries where we eat all this mush all the time. And our mouths have changed the shapes because we're not used. One of the first things I noticed when I got on a carnivore way of eating was, man, I get tired of chewing because I'm not used to chewing meat. Well, I don't have that problem anymore, but that was initially something I noticed was, this is a lot of work. I'm used to eating
because I mean, when you think about it, like, what do we put people on if in the medical field that can't chew?
Peanut butter, applesauce.
A pureed diet. And what is mashed potatoes And
Mhm.
macaroni and cheese, you can swallow that easy without, what about spaghetti? You can swallow that without chewing, really. It's like we've become very lazy eaters. We don't have to work for it, like with meat anymore, comparatively speaking.
Yeah. Whenever I see, when I wash dishes a lot because I'm always in the kitchen, it seems. I'm trying to help my family eat better, so I'd spend a lot of time in there. When I see more spoons and bowls, that's when I get concerned. I'm like, what are my kids eating? I know they're eating cereal and all that junk that's just mush. And I never use a spoon. That's an interesting thing you find out when you go carnivore is you hardly ever have a need for a spoon anymore because you're not scooping up anything. You're stabbing something that you're going to eat.
I do make soup. I do make soup with bone broth and stew meat. So we still use spoons every now and then.
Yeah, I usually have a lot of fat in my, if I'm eating, like I had some slow cooked sirloin tip the other day that
Yum.
I add some suet to it so it has a little bit more fat. And then when I'm done eating the meat, I'll drink all the liquid that's in there too. But I usually don't need a spoon. But I'm just saying that that's one
Yeah.
of the things that I found that was interesting is I hardly ever touch a spoon anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
I like the idea of bone broth, but I'll be honest, I'm not
Not a
interested enough
fan.
to make it. I'll buy bone broth pre-made, but have had a
It's
lot
really
of
hard to
bones. I wound
find
up
a
giving them to my dogs.
it's hard to find a good quality bone broth. I make my own because yeah, because I just can't find it without carrots. Like I'm like, why are you putting carrots in the bone broth? Like, can we just have bones and water and salt and apple cider vinegar to help break it down a little bit better? Like, and then
Mhm.
pressure cook the snot out of it. That's all you need.
Yeah, I get. Well, that's just what we're used to doing. My wife, who she's been, by the way, doing carnivore again. She did a 30-day stint last year, and she violated the rules so many times. I can't even really say she did a solid 30 days, but she noticed some differences cutting out a lot of processed food. This time she's been more strict at it, although she did make one mistake about 2 weeks in. But she noticed that pain that she had in her neck for years and years started to go away. And it's
Mhm.
been nice to see that she's giving it a try again. I don't even remember why I started telling you about that. That's one of the problems I have sometimes when we're doing these live streams. I see some of the comments. People are like, "What's he looking at when he's looking over there?" I'm
He's looking at the
trying to
comments. He's
trying
not
to
looking at the counter. We don't care about that counter up there. I
Right.
promise.
I
We're
don't
just
care how many
chatting.
numbers there are. I mean, I'm thankful that people are here, but I'm trying to see what people are saying or thinking so we can hopefully respond to any questions they might be having. But it's
Yeah.
distracting doing these
Somebody
things, and I'm trying to have a conversation with you, and I'm actually looking at the camera when I'm doing that. I would rather look down here at the screen where I can see your face because it feels more natural when I'm talking to you.
Yeah,
But
I
I
look
think
at
of
your
all
face
these things
too.
when we're
I don't
doing
look
this.
at the camera. I'm horrible at these lives, guys. Sorry. I'm not gonna sit here and stare into that camera because it feels weird. I look at your face because I'm taught eye contact.
Yeah.
But somebody did ask a question like, "What's my recipe?" Honestly, I can do a little bit of onion. So I throw water, bones that still have some meat on it. So like if I cook a tomahawk, I will save the little bit of sinew and meat that's still on that bone, and I'll freeze it and then collect enough. I'll put it into an instant pot and just absolutely just it's water, a little bit of apple cider vinegar, smoked salt because I like Redmond smoked salt, and a little bit of onion, and then I will put it on for like 5 or 6 hours on high pressure. So I have to run it twice, one for 4 hours and one for 2 hours because mine only does four. Um, and then yeah, that's my bone broth. I just strain it all out and I freeze it.
I was scrolling through some of the comments now, just trying to see if there was any questions on
Yeah,
my
there's
end.
some comments I'm not going to comment on because I'm going to be nice today. Oh, Dennis is here. Hi, Dennis. And who's your carnivore? Hi, guys. Oh, you're welcome, Nancy. I hope that makes it easy. It's really super simple. And then when I freeze it, I freeze it into littler containers and then put a little bit of extra Redmonds in it because I like mine super salty. And then I'll put a little pat of butter in it too. And so depending on what I'm doing with it, I can either just drink it or I can throw it into a pot with some stew meat. Isn't that crazy? Hoosier saying that carnivore fixed bleeding gums too. And somebody else said that. And I'm like, yes. And it's crazy. And I am convinced that it's iron. I'm convinced it's because people's iron levels are just not where they need to be.
I believe no one can carbon date anything because no one knows how much carbon existed in it when God created. See, I see a lot of stuff about what, when it comes to what we're talking about here, is a lot of it is things, if they're arguing with what I'm saying, they're saying, well, you just believe something men wrote down. Well,
Yeah.
the textbooks aren't much different as far as that
Yeah.
goes.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that, let's see, let's see. Here you go. One of my books. Men wrote that. Men and women wrote that.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make it any less true? Does it?
Yeah.
Does it really?
And a lot of them got together and agreed. They agreed that this is accurate. But if you start to look at what they did to come up with this, they reject a lot of things that don't fit with what they want it to fit. And when that's the point that I was making early on, is when you start rejecting data because it doesn't fit what you want it to fit, that's when you're no longer doing science. You know, you're doing another form of faith. I think faith is an important part of anybody learning anything. How is a child going to learn geography when he doesn't know anything beyond the world of his own house and yard and the school that he goes to and the town that he lives in? How is he supposed to believe in things that exist around the world that he hasn't been able to see or experience? Even seeing pictures of them doesn't prove anything. And then when you start to get into the philosophical side of things, I really can't prove anything except to myself that I exist. You know, you hear that thing that says, I think, therefore I am. Well, I can't prove that you're actually here. I mean, that's kind of the whole matrix argument, that I can only process what my five senses are telling my brain. And I find all that to be very interesting when it comes to any of this argument. When you start to say you're going to prove something, I'm just saying that faith is required to believe this origin theory of evolution just as much as faith is required to believe what I believe, biblically speaking. As a matter of fact, it may be required more to believe that, because like I said, if you can believe that everything came from nothing, that is a bigger leap of faith than believing that a designer created it all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people can argue in the comments all they want. Like, I'm not here to argue. I'm happy where I am, and I'm secure in my faith. So I know what's happening to me when I pass on, and I know where I'll be. So I do want to read a scripture, and I think this is important. And so if you are a Christian and you're watching and you're like, well, you're not doing things right, and I just want to remind people of one thing, and because it's really kind of on my heart, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So in Romans 14, it's called, I have a little bit of a headline on mine that says the danger of criticism. Accept Christians who are weak in faith and don't argue with them about what they think is right or wrong. For instance, one person believes that it is all right to eat anything, but another believer who has a sensitive conscience will eat only vegetables. Those who think it is all right to eat anything must not look down on those who won't. And those who won't eat certain foods must not condemn those who do, for God has accepted them. Who are you to condemn God's servants? They are responsible to the Lord, so let him tell them whether they are right or wrong. The Lord's power will help them do as they should.
Yeah.
You know, and that is important for us to kind of remember. And even if you're not a Christian, don't criticize others because it's not nice. Let's not argue about this.
Well, that's one of the things that I kind of had a not fear of, but I have to keep my own arrogance in check when I come on to talk
Mhm.
about something like this, because like I said, being an expert at anything, the more you study anything, the more you realize the deeper you go, the more questions you have. There is another
Mhm.
concept that, like when you shine a light on a wall, if you took a flashlight and shined it on a wall, you're going to have a small little bit of light there. But on the outer edge of that light, you've got darkness. That means that the amount of part you don't know is that much bigger than the part that you do know. And you expand your knowledge, you have a bigger light area, but now the dark
Mhm.
ring around it is even larger than it was before. So
Mhm.
I am not here to tell anybody that I have got all the answers, but I know that when I search for the truth, I find them in the scriptures, that they
Yes.
stay the truth each time I test them with my experience in life and with my experience in my walk of faith, is that it's the only thing that stays solid. Um,
Well, I think, and that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to test everything against the scriptures.
it,
Everything.
it's personal too. It's like me testing for myself, not
Mhm.
so much to come tell somebody else this is why you've got to believe this or anything like that. Now, the
Yeah.
Bible may talk to me like that. This is what you're supposed to believe, and I'm like, okay, well, let me figure out how this works in my life, and I'll keep applying it as I go. But the Bible talks about, before you start worrying about what's in somebody else's eye, what their problem is, you see a little fleck in their eye, I want to make a comment about that. I want to make a comment about what you're doing wrong. You've got to start looking at, well, what am I doing wrong? And when I start to look at myself, and when I started this process of carnivore diet, even, or when I go back to 2010, when I kind of came back to Jesus and realized that I was on the wrong path, it wasn't about me figuring out what everybody else was doing wrong. It was just about, why is my life a shambles? And it had to do with pursuing hedonistic things and following pursuits that were going to make me feel better about life for a little bit, give me a dopamine rush in my brain so that I could not be upset about the fact that I can't pay my bills today or something like that. And the more that I focus on what is it between me and God that I need to be working on, the less I'm worried about what other people are doing. So I'm not here to say that if somebody's eating a vegan diet or if somebody is doing XYZ, that they're wrong. But I will
Mhm.
say that, if the scripture says that you shouldn't be doing it, you might want to take it to heart if you believe in your faith, because what I think the Lord is trying to do with us as believers is like a
Mhm.
good father raising a child. Son, if you put your finger in the light socket, or which, like you think of a light socket you pull down, a lot of people think of the plug on the wall. I'm like, I can't fit my finger in there anyway. What are you
Mhm.
talking about? But if you take a light bulb out of a socket and you put your finger in there and you touch the two electrodes together, you could electrocute yourself. He's trying to tell you, don't do these things because they're bad for you in the long run.
Yeah.
And then we get into arguments about sexual behavior and all kind of stuff. And it's like, look, nobody's right if they're doing the wrong thing when it comes to that. A lot of times you'll get arguments about the homosexuals being worse than the heterosexuals. I'm like, no, if you're not doing it the right way that way either, then you're not following God's plan there, and it has to do with marriage and procreation. So
Mhm.
my point isn't that I'm not my point is that I'm not here to tell anybody what they're doing right or wrong. That's what the Bible itself is for. And if you're looking for answers, that's where the answers are. Because ever since I've applied them to my life, everything has changed. I'm still going to die. I'm still going to grow up in this world and face difficulty and challenges, but all of those challenges are meant to make me a better person than I was. And the Bible tells me that too, that these challenges and difficulties that I'm going to have are here to make me better. One
Yeah.
of the things I've been able to realize, thanks to getting the poisons out of my food, all the things that are not food, is that I've got poisons coming in from all directions, whether it was the images I was watching on television, the music I was listening to that was telling me I don't need nothing but a good time. And I love that group when I was growing up. But at the same time, when I listen to those words now, I have to stop and think, is that really what life's about? Because I've pursued that lifestyle and it leads to destruction. And I don't want to be destroyed in my thinking. I want to be able to pursue the lifestyle that's going to give me meaning and something that's real, that I can hold on to. And the idea of having family and children and possibly grandchildren someday, that has real meaning for me. And that's all biblically based as well. So I don't want anybody here to hear me saying, you need to do something different. I'm saying that if you're looking for the truth, you're going to find the truth in the Bible, but you have to be searching for it. God wants us to reach out to him. He's reached out to us. That's why he sent Jesus here to die for us. He reached out to us and said, look, you can't clear the slate. I'm going to do it for you. All you have to do is accept the gift. And if you're not accepting that gift, it's usually because you don't want to listen to those things that deal with sexual behavior. You don't want to listen to those things that where God's saying, don't do this or don't do that, because you want to do those things. And when you get to the point that you realize, well, that's a childish behavior. If I have a child and I tell him, you can only watch TV for an hour a day, well, he doesn't want to hear that because he wants to watch TV all day long. But I know that if he does that all day long, it's going to rot his brain and it's going to rot his body because he's not getting out and having any exercise.
So. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. See, somebody said something about looking into the beliefs of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They can believe whatever they want to believe about the vegan and vegetarian lifestyle. And I'm not going to argue against them. I will say that there is a passage in that is Acts 10:9, has to do with Peter. If they,
Well, my only problem with the aspects of the Seventh-day Adventists is that they've influenced policy that has to do with nutrition and health.
Oh yeah. And well, and then even Kellogg. I mean, absolutely.
Right. Well, that's the type of influence we're talking about. They're anti-meat. And it's for reasons that don't seem to have any biblical basis from what I can tell, because ever since the Noah's Ark, after the flood, meat was a big part of our diets. And I thought it was interesting too, Dr. Chafee, when he was talking about the lifespans of people being around 120 years was normal for people that eat meat, but he's not making any biblical reference at all. But even
it's amazing how that works, isn't it? I'm sorry. Sorry, that is science proving the Bible on that one, because I heard that a long time before the gene was ever mapped.
Yeah, well, Genesis 6 is where we get into the post-flood era. And in Genesis 6:3, the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever because he is also flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. That doesn't mean he was limited to 120 years, because in other verses that follow that, we see that Sarah lived to be 127 years, and other people lived to be varying numbers that were more or less than that. But I just thought it was interesting that science leads us back to the same things the Bible already said. There was a time when, I think, what would you say? Anthropologists might have been, or maybe it was one of the other humanities that study civilizations. I forget which one. But basically, there was an argument years ago that there was no Hittite empire. There was never a civilization known as the Hittites. And they argued that, well, that means the Bible's wrong because it talks about something that didn't exist. Well, today we have scientific proof that the Hittites did exist. So they had to change their thinking on that. And it's like, well, the Bible was proven right here too. So it's just interesting to me how often that things that were already in the Bible, the notion of length, breadth, width, and height. When you hear the Apostle Paul talk about these 4 dimensions, people say, well, what is that 4th dimension? We live in what we like to say, we live in the 3-dimensional world. Well, when you add time, you add that 4th dimension, because you've got the physical length, width, and height of things. But when you add breadth, you're basically talking about time, because now you've got how things move through space. So we know dimensions exist. And we also know 2 dimensions exist, because when I got an iPad and I'm drawing on the screen or anything like that, or whatever I'm looking at, it's a 2-dimensional version of what it is.
What it is, yeah.
Those other dimensions are what we start to get into when we get into the heavenly realm. Once you go beyond 4 dimensions, we got people talking about seeing UFOs and aliens and all kind of things going on these days. I personally believe that those are spiritual things that are coming into our realm that we're seeing and we're not understanding what they are. And the best way I could explain that, I would listen to Chuck Missler talked about this a lot, where he would say, if you took a two-dimensional man and woman that were written on a piece of paper, and then you put your fingers through the page, their perspective would be there's 3 or 4 holes appearing in front of them, or maybe even lines, because they can only see them from the two-dimensional aspect. So they just see 3 or 4 lines there, but they don't see the whole hand that's there. So as far as the spiritual side goes, to me, it's just a dimension that's beyond what we can understand, but we're able to understand it enough because of what's left for us in the scripture there. And when you look at a book that was written over a couple thousand years with, over 60 different authors, I forget the number of books and the number of authors, but when you start to look at how everything goes together, it's too perfect. It's almost as if it was written by one person, even though there are multiple authors. And that's where we get into being able to have more faith in it, because it's so credible for so long. And some people will say, well, these things argue, like this scripture argues with that scripture. And then you got to deal with the different, what's the word I'm looking for? Dispensations, the way God's working with man at a different time period. Like before Adam, we didn't have a written scripture, and God worked with people in a different way. Going back to Adam himself, he spoke to him directly. And many times it would talk about in the Bible that they would have theophanies where God would appear to people. And then once we started to have inspired scripture, God was working with us in a different way, but Christ hadn't come yet. And then after Christ had come and he died on the cross and removed that barrier between us, those who were living before then looked forward to that moment that the Messiah would come. Those that were believers, when I say those that live after then look back at what Christ did as being the thing that has freed us. So they don't actually conflict with each other. They're just different ways that God is working with us throughout time. If it was simple to understand, then it wouldn't be God. If it was something that I could fit into my little brain and understand it all immediately, then how is that something that created the universe? It's like arrogant to say that God doesn't exist because I can't grasp everything about him.
Yeah. Agreed. This is totally a squirrel moment. But somebody that I guess he's your follower, or he could be a she, I don't know. JLH. Oh, I love it. Completely unrelated. What is her accent? Does anyone recognize it? I'll give you 3 guesses. You can go ahead and guess, JLH. I'll give you 3 guesses. Somebody probably, I think Dennis might know where I'm from, and I think Sherry, Carnivore Mommy, she might know where I'm from. Do you know where I'm from, Dante? Originally?
I think you told me once, but I don't remember. I mean, this is the first time you and I have spoken face to face.
Face to face,
a lot of people need to know that, and we're not, in person together, but it's just been via email prior to this. So
email and Facebook Messenger, because I work. A lot of people may not know this, but the Healing Humanity, Dante is part of the Healing Humanity documentary. Also, I do believe, aren't you?
Yeah,
you're on it.
I will be. Carrie hasn't come by here yet, but he's supposed to.
Yes. So Dante is going to be one of our peeps for Healing Humanity, and I am the assistant production manager for Healing Humanity. So we met through Carrie Man, Homestead House. So that's kind of how we got to know each other. So somebody said Georgia, not Kentucky. Nope. Believe it or not, I am a Yankee. So you guys got to figure out which. I live in Dennis McConnell. I do live in North Carolina, but that's because we're military and we move all the time, and we're moving again next year. Yay.
I'm anxious to hear where home is for you. I saw something somebody put in here as Jesus was pescatarian keto. I'm like, well, Jesus was also poor. He wasn't wealthy. I live in the United States in 2024. This is if not the richest country in the world, it's darn near close to it, even though we keep giving away all of our money and spending it on things we shouldn't spend it on. I happen to be blessed enough to where I can eat meat. He didn't have meat as a regular thing in his life. Also, the bread that they ate isn't anything like the bread that we eat today. Even when you go and buy like sourdough bread that they sell over at Aldi, and it says the 3 ingredients are wheat, salt, and water, it's like, well, that wheat is not the wheat that they grew back then either.
Oh my gosh, no, it's not. We have done so much to it.
Yeah, it's not even the same material that it would have been back then. So I think it might have been healthier for us to eat back then, but it was still poor man's food, and you weren't able to get as much from that as you would have been from meat. But when it comes to what Jesus ate, it has more to do with the spiritual aspects of his life that we look at. I'm not looking.
Yeah. I don't care what he ate, actually.
Huh?
I kind of don't care what he ate.
Right.
But that's me. It's me personally. Like, he ate fish. I wish we could eat more fish and we hadn't destroyed our oceans as much as what we have.
Yeah, and I know he ate figs because he stopped to pick some figs up.
He stopped to fix it. Yeah, when it didn't. I love that. Do you know I love that verse? It's like, no figs, you are dead to me. That's what that's the way it's like.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? But I mean, there's an understanding of what happens with Israel and the church there.
Yeah,
so I mean, that again, it wasn't about diet that he was explaining that. What he was here to teach us was about something much higher than diet. And the Bible isn't really a roadmap for what to eat, although there are Israeli dietary laws. A lot of these things probably had a lot to do with healthy eating, but they were more about setting Israel apart from the other nations from the Tower of Babel, the nations that followed other gods. It was about a spiritual separation. It didn't have as much to do. It wasn't like God was saying, this is the way you have to eat. Now, a lot of Christians on my channel are going to argue with me on this, but you know what? I know we have a lot of different viewpoints on these things. I believe the faith that we're taught in the New Testament gives us a whole lot of grace on what we can and what we can't do. But at the same time, that same person who talks about faith also talks about all things are allowed, but not all things are profitable. So I'm allowed to eat bread if I want to, and I eat pork if I want to. It's just, is it profitable for me? If I have the choice between beef and pork, I'm going to eat beef every time because it's a cleaner meat and it tastes better to me now that I've gotten my palate cleansed of all the junk that I've had in my life. But it's not because the Bible said something about the food that I eat it or I don't eat it. I just like to point out a lot of the scriptures that talk about eating meat being better for us in a lot of ways, not mixing the grains of the field. I forget, it was in Deuteronomy or Leviticus or maybe even both, where it talked about mixing the seed together, defiling the land. And that's essentially, to me, what I hear when I hear we're doing all this crossbreeding of different vegetables and fruits to make things sweeter and more resistant to pests and able to be harvested year round. We're defiling the food. We're making it where it's more pleasable to us, but we're making it actually worse for us in the long run. And
agreed.
I'm trying to think if there's anything I left out of that, but I mean, the bottom line is that it's not here to be a textbook on the history of the world or a textbook on diet, but there's some information we can glean from it. Now, Jesus being that he ate a lot of fish and things like that doesn't say that we're not supposed to eat meat. And I don't think that I've heard other people that I agree with say, well, we're supposed to eat meat. It's a sin if you don't eat it. I'm like, that's going a little too far for me that it's a sin if you don't eat meat. But I can say this, that if I switch to not eating meat, it's going to affect my health in a negative way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm scared to go back. Like, after how I was in 2018, and because I was at my wit's end, like, I am convinced that if I would not, because I started out keto and then went, eventually went to carnivore. I am convinced that if I would not have found this way of eating, that I literally would be dead. either dead or my husband would be wiping my rear end. I almost said butt in a different terminology because I do have a potty mouth sometimes, guys. I'm still working on it. I am a work in progress.
Me too.
But I'm convinced that I'd be dead, and I'm scared to go back. Like, people are like, "Do you ever cheat?" Like, no. I think the biggest thing I've cheated, I had some sushi a couple years ago, and the soy sauce tore me up. It tore me up.
The rice
And
alone will tear me up. If I eat white rice by itself.
I haven't tried it by itself, but the soy did it. And it's anytime I eat anything with soy in it now, it's like my stomach it's not even the pain. It's like cramping. It's just so bad. And then I ate some mofongo in Puerto Rico. And if you don't know what mofongo is, everybody, it is like a way that they make plantain. So they boil it, they mash it, and then they fry it, and they do a bunch of stuff with it. And it was okay. I didn't have a bad reaction to it, but it was my first time ever eating it. So, I do like sashimi. I like me some raw tuna and some raw salmon. I just don't eat it very often. So somebody did get it almost very close. The closest one I saw was Southern Ohio. That was the closest one I saw was Southern Ohio. I am from West Virginia. And yes, we are Yankees. No, who's your carnivore? It's never really worth it. Shoot, what did I eat? If I eat a chicken wing, that's a cheat for me, and my joints hurt and I hate it, but I love chicken. I miss chicken wings so bad.
So funny you bring up mofongo. I never knew that was a real food. I assumed it might be. The only time I ever heard it was on Sanford and Son when his next door neighbor came over and said, "I made you a special dish. It's called mofongo."
It's real. It is real. And everybody was talking about how great it was. And I was like, if I'm going to try it. It was really not that great. I was like, man, I just ate like 50 carbs, which is like more than I eat in like a month. And I was like, and it wasn't that great. No, I didn't feel bad after eating it though. So that was a plus. It was not very great.
I get a lot of guff from people that do lion diet and they're super duper strict about it because they'll say, "Oh, if you eat eggs ever, then you're not lion diet. You're not really lion." I'm like, what are we arguing about here? Stop arguing about all these things. Lion diet is an elimination diet to eliminate a lot of stuff. But at the same time, there's some things I think I'd like to be able to bring back, like eggs would be something I would like to do. Fish is something I would like to be able to bring back into my diet. But when my gut has a problem that doesn't allow me to digest those things right, it doesn't mean I've healed just because I've been doing this 3.5 years, although I have noticed an improvement. First year and a half, I didn't eat eggs at all. And when I tried to bring them back in after 1.5 years, I noticed that I would get this flushed feeling in my face, like I'd eaten something that was allergic to, and it would cause me to have digestive issues. Now, over the past 2 years, I've brought eggs in again and again and again and reintroduced them and then taken them back out because almost every time I still had some kind of reaction to them. Well, one of the things that I've had some lately is I've been having butter again, and then it seems to bring back my hoarse throat. Hey, I love when it does that. It didn't do it. Oh, there you go.
That's my favorite one.
But whenever I do those things, like I bring different foods back in, I usually find that there's something about it that affects me negatively still, but it's getting less and less. I had some eggs this morning, and I think that might be one of the reasons why I have a bit of a hoarse throat thing going on, because I just felt I'm going to give it a try and see how it does. Because I don't think that some things are necessarily bad for me. It's just that my body has rejected those things after years of what I've done to it, eating all the different, not only the lectins that are in the vegetables. I mean, I don't like to make them the big bad guy because I think it has more to do with ultra processed food and sugar. That was a big part of my diet. And vegetable oils, which we've talked about, are basically just industrial lubricants. And putting those things in my body over the years have done a lot of damage. Not to mention when it came to vegetables, I was a big spice eater. I would eat all kind of chipotle and habanero and jalapeno. You give me some ghost peppers and I grind them up into a powder. I'd make a dip with those. So, I mean, all of that stuff had a
You're
negative
brave.
effect on my body. Well, and that was the reason why I probably even tried those things. I remember, if I'm honest with myself, and I think a lot of us aren't, like I said, when I'm really honest with myself, the only reason I would eat the insane sauce level wings is I thought it would be cool if I could do it and you couldn't do it. You know, it's not because I enjoyed having my mouth go numb on the first bite of food that I had, and then the rest of my meal just be pain. It was because I wanted to be cool.
I'm convinced that some people are just genetically better at eating hot foods. I have a friend
Sure they
from
are.
Puerto Rico, not from Puerto Rico, from Peru, and she used to bring habaneros like in her lunch. She'd have habanero peppers, and she'd be sitting there. She'd be like, I'm
Yeah.
like, "Is that not hot?" She's like, "No." I'm like, I could just dumbfounded, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I did a lot of that, you know, and I think that can have an effect because those are
Mhm.
strong chemicals that are in those plants that make them so caustically hot like that. And
Yeah.
some people are going to be better at dealing with those things. Then we start to get into genetics. Genetics do play a role in how our bodies
Mhm.
react to the things we eat. Some people are able to eat all kind, as I've mentioned before, they can eat all kind of high octane garbage. That's just a way of saying they can eat anything. They can eat pizza and ice cream and all that stuff, and they still look like their body's chiseled out of stone. I was never able to do that. So genetically, I'm different than my best friend that I grew up with. When we were both exactly, you know, in our youth, we ate the same stuff, but I would gain weight and he wouldn't gain a pound. So that
Mhm.
obviously plays a role. Like you said, with, you know, when I went to South Texas and I found out that you could get jalapenos at Burger King, I thought, why? Why would you even want jalapenos at Burger King? And then I got used to them and that changed. But
Yeah.
there were people I would see that would get a jar of jalapenos and just eat them. And then I wanted to do that because I thought, well, that's pretty cool if you can eat that hot stuff like that. And it would get people to do exactly what you said. Isn't that hot? Yeah, it's not bad at all. I'm over here suffering while I'm doing it, but I got used to it too. I got to where I actually did like it on
Did
some of the
like it.
lower ones.
That was one of my great aunts. I remember like a story, like you get stories passed down to you, which is backwoods West Virginia, you know. We had stories. So apparently my great aunt, bless her soul, um, my grandmother would can hot peppers, and she would come in. My great aunt would come in and get a jar of them hot peppers out, and she'd sit there and just eat them straight out of the jar. And they were like, "Why you do that?" Because she had tears running down her face, and she's like, "I can't stop. They're so good." And I'm like, "Nothing is that good." Like I do. There is no food on this planet that if it made me cry, that would be good enough. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, on the flip side of that, I used to think that those Girl Scout cookies that had
oh my
caramel
gosh.
and chocolate and I forget what else I think they had coconut on them too. I used to think those things
Is it
were
the
from heaven.
Samoas?
I don't know what they were called, but whatever they were like, oh God, those are, I could eat the whole box in one sitting, you know, and
Yeah.
that did damage. It just didn't do it while I was eating it.
It's slow damage. I don't think
Mhm.
people realize that. Like, there's a saying in the carnivore community that I really like, and it's, you know, the food you eat, it's either poison or it's either poisoning you or it's making you healthier. I'm sure that somebody's got the actual quote and it's more eloquent, but you know, and it's true. Like it might not be rat poison, you know, that's going to kill you tonight. However, over time, you know, and as a nurse, you know, that is one thing that I see because I'm a hospice nurse by trade. So all my patients are dying from something that's preventable. And in our church, we have a lovely little country church that we go to here. 99% of the people that are on our prayer list, it's because of things that if they were on a proper human diet, they might not have that, you know.
TH said something here responding to Coronado. I didn't see what Coronado said before, but it was interesting. He said, I think just believing this diet would help my anxiety, I believe helped reduce my anxiety greatly.
Mm-hmm.
Just believing it reduced his anxiety. And I think he says, he continues to say, your mind is very powerful and you are in charge of your thoughts. This gets into what we believe does matter. It matters tremendously
Absolutely.
what you believe. And if you're believing something that is not true, it can lead to negative results. So if you're believing things that are true, it can lead to positive results. I struggle with this notion of like being positive, being the thing that fixes you. But there is something to be said about not being negative. Like I have a very strong propensity in my personality to be self-critical to the point that I just beat myself up over things. And there's a lot of people who suffer with that, and it causes anxiety. And usually that comes from focusing on yourself too much. If you focus more on others, you'll have a different perspective. If you focus more on being thankful, you'll have a different perspective. Well, the Bible tells us that we should be giving thanks. We should be thankful in all things. We should be joyful in all things. And it's hard to be joyful when you're in a painful circumstance. If your health is causing you pain, if the loss of a loved one is causing you pain, how do I have joy in those situations? And it's finding that joy, finding that thankfulness, even when things suck, that can get you through, because your belief is in something that's true and good. So believing that you're going to fix your anxiety through what you're eating is going to play a big role, but you're still going to have anxieties. You're still going to have tests. You're still going to have struggles. And it's staying focused on the right things that's going to make the difference. Anytime I get focused on, over the past 6 months, I've had some struggles because financially it's been difficult. But I noticed when I focus on the financial side of it, when I focus on what I need to be, like what the problem is, the problem just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But whenever I say, all right, Lord, I'm going to do what I can do today. I'm going to put my hands to something good, just like the Bible says, to keep moving forward, to keep doing the right things, to not give up on doing good, then he's going to provide. And yet every month, even when I look at it on paper that it shouldn't be, I should be bankrupt based on everything that I've seen go on in my life financially on paper, but every month the bills get paid. Every month we've been able to have a roof over our head, and I can still buy meat. And now my wife is eating meat, so I'm having to spend a little bit more on her grocery bill, but she's spending less buying stuff out and about. It's amazing how when you just have faith in what you know is good and true, it does fix things. That belief in the right thing is real important.
Well, I think, and I think that being faithful, just like you said, we should be bankrupt on paper sometimes, I think, but we're very faithful in our lives and in our tithing, and everything seems to just magically work out. I don't want to say magically because that's a horrible term, but
it feels like magic, though. It feels that way because it feels like it goes against physics as far as what, like maybe it goes against accounting in my example, but it goes against what you can scientifically prove, and yet it keeps making sense. Somebody made a comment, my doctor recommends paleo because carnivore is hard on your kidneys. Any thoughts? Well, I've heard that protein is bad for your kidneys. And maybe if you have already got chronic kidney disease, there can be some factors in there and what medicines you're taking. But I will say this, I didn't even think about my kidneys when I first got started. My EGFR was in the mid 60s back then, which is kind of a rating. I think it goes up to about 100. The closer to 100 you get, the better your overall kidney function. And there are other factors that are involved in kidney function. But when my doctor noticed my blood work after I started eating carnivore, that my blood work went up to where my EGFR was showing in the 70s. And then later it was in the 80s after almost a year of doing it. He said, well, I was a little concerned about your kidney function before you started eating this way, but your kidneys have improved ever since. And the only thing I can say is my kidney function has improved,
It's
and all I've eaten is meat, with the exception of the times that I've experimented with things. Mostly it's experiments. There have been times when I've eaten things that I shouldn't have eaten. I can remember them in some specific things too. Like when my stepfather died, I ate a whole tub of ice cream after that, and I regretted it for a week, which was
but you know what? But I give you, yeah. I'm sorry for your loss.
Oh, well, thank you. And that's another thing that happened. I haven't ever talked about this, not since it happened, but I think last year, a lot of the things financially have piled up, but also my oldest brother died. I haven't mentioned that to anybody yet. I've got
I'm
some
so
difficulty with
sorry.
my own children, and my natural children, and it hurts my heart, but I love them, regardless of what they think of me and where I am in the world. I know that I had to get myself straight before I could be of any help to them, and that I hope that they'll come back and realize that I love them regardless of what decisions they're making. But all of these things add up. But I have still been able to deal with these anxieties much better as a result of carnivore, answering that question earlier about anxiety.
Yeah, it does help a lot for anxiety. And for kidney, I want to touch on the kidney thing. So not only, I guess I didn't really introduce myself. I'm so sorry. So people on your channel have no idea who I am. I'm also a PhD coach. So if everybody knows, the proper human diet was coined by Dr. Ken Berry. I'm one of his coaches for his group. So we just had Michelle Hearn on the other night, and it was a fabulous interview or meeting with her. It wasn't an interview, it was a meeting. And she was talking about seeing people who were on stage 4 kidney go into stage 2 kidney disease after people going on a proper human diet. So whether that's keto, whether that's carnivore, it is reversing kidney. It is reversing kidney issues in many people. So, and there have been scientific studies that I have read and like worked on for my pathophysiology class and research class that I brought up that shows that high protein diets do not cause kidney damage. So I've seen the research on it, and they did it, and it was very good. It was a very good study. They did it wasn't double blind because people knew whether they were eating protein or not. But
the one area where you can exacerbate kidney problems and you're eating a lot of protein and fat is if you're adding sugar, though, because
yes,
sugar
exactly.
tells the kidneys to do certain things like not release the salt that you're holding on to, and then that salt will stay in your body and add to your blood pressure. And it's not the salt that's causing the problem, it's just the salt is not going out.
Yeah, it's the insulin from the sugar that when insulin raises, it tells your kidneys to hold on to water and salt. And a normal functioning kidney should be able to just get rid of the excess easily. So yeah.
Also, insulin is a growth hormone, so it causes your organs to grow faster than they would normally. That's one of the reasons why children are experiencing puberty so much younger these days than they did as recent as 100 years ago. The average age for puberty was in the late teens. Now the average age for puberty is around 10 years old for boys and girls. Girls are getting it a little earlier than boys are. They always have. But now it's, like 9 years old for a girl hitting puberty, or 10 years old. And a boy is more like 12 years old for hitting puberty. And it used to be around 16, 17. But it's because their organs are growing faster because of all the insulin that's always in their body. Insulin's not a bad hormone, but too much of it is a problem. And when you're consuming sugar, it causes all kind of organ problems.
Well, if you look at my daughter, everybody looks at her and they think she's like 13, 14 years old, and she's 17. And like people are like, oh my gosh, she doesn't look like, she doesn't look like she's 17, almost an adult. And I'm like, well, that's because I don't feed her soy and she's on a ketogenic diet. So her insulin's low.
I saw some people that were thankful for me sharing some of my trials lately, but I don't like to go into them too much because I never like to be here to complain. When you have an audience like I have, I don't want people thinking, oh, I'm gonna donate to help because he's having a hard time. I only want people, if they're going to support the channel, it's because the information I have is helpful for them and they want to have more people get that information. But when I do see people say things like somebody on here named Lala said, I'm experiencing that also, Dante. And then later she said, I'm sad. I think a lot of people are going through some sadness just since what we've experienced since 2020, all the mind games that are being played with us as the entire human race seems to be being played with by powers that are above our pay grade, so to speak. You know, whether you want to call it the CIA or the World Economic Forum or whoever's in government at the time or the deep state, there's all these different names for what we're dealing with. But from a Christian perspective, I still think comes down to the fact it's the forces of evil that want to put us into slavery, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. We're experiencing that on a very heavy level right now. And it's like you're not allowed to really acknowledge it. You don't want to acknowledge it because you're trying to get through life. It's hard enough just to wake up in the morning, get up, get dressed, do everything you got to do to get to work, get through your work day without killing somebody, get through driving to work without wanting to kill somebody, get through driving home from work without wanting to kill somebody.
I laugh because I live in North Carolina and that is people can't drive here.
Well, here in Florida, everybody wants to live here now. So we've got all these 2-lane roads that are just jam-packed with cars. And like my son just started driving, my stepson, my oldest stepson just started driving. And my concern isn't so much him because he seems to have a good head on his shoulders. But I keep reminding him it's not you that I'm necessarily worried about doing the wrong thing. It's that there's cars are going to be stopped right in front of you. But all of this stuff with traffic and making us angry and just daily life, the stuff that you've got to deal with to get through life is hard enough. Then you start adding the inflation into all this where it's that invisible tax that's being caused by people that say they're offering you something for free when there's nothing for free. They're using it to get elected into positions of power. And then they delegate all of the actual responsibility they have to a bureaucracy that we don't get rid of when we elect new people. And all of this stuff starts to build up. It's like, it doesn't matter who I vote for. It's going to be a bad problem because the deep state is still there, or you could also just call it the bureaucracy that's been put in place that Congress ceded their authority to a long time ago. It's just a club of people changing names that are in authority now. And we grew up, a lot of us grew up in a world where we thought, these people are actually trying to be public servants. They're trying to do the right thing. And we're seeing that they're not trying to, they're not even afraid to take off the mask. And like you can get an app where you can follow and see what certain congressmen are buying stock in because they have inside information. And then you're going to match what they're buying so that you can make money off of it too. It's like,
there's an app for that?
Yes, there's an app where you can see, like, for instance, what Nancy Pelosi is buying stock in right now so that you can match her
bourbon.
purchase.
Sorry.
Huh?
I said bourbon.
Bourbon?
Buying stock in bourbon.
Oh.
Sorry.
Well, I'm talking about the stock exchange market, but yeah, I know, but I don't even pay attention to that stuff as much as I used to anymore.
No, we don't watch news. We don't watch news.
But what I was getting at, though, is that everybody is feeling this high pressure that's coming from all these decisions that are being made that we don't feel like we have any power over. And I don't think it's a political thing that's going to be fixed by who gets elected or although I would rather see certain people get elected than other people, I don't think that's going to fix the problem. The problem is going to come at this level. It's going to come from, are you being, as a man who's married, am I being the husband that I need to be for my wife? Am I being the father that I need to be for my children? And there's times where I question, how am I raising my boys right? And am I doing enough? Because doing the right thing a lot of times involves me not being their buddy. You know, it's tough to make those decisions to be the right man for your wife, to be the right man for your children. It's tough for a woman that grows up and hears all of this feminist ideology. Like we mentioned in the brief time we talked before we got started today.
Yeah.
I'd love to have my wife come on sometime, but she's so introverted and she's not really big on being in front of the camera. But she'll tell you.
We should do a couples one with me and my husband and you and your wife.
someday that's going to happen. She's building up to it. It's just the fact that she's doing carnivore lets me know that. But she talks about how she realizes that what she was raised to believe about being a woman and being feminine and all this fighting between men and women for who's better and all this, she realizes that she's been told a lie, and it's made her miserable to pursue life from that perspective. Whereas that she's trying to look at, okay, what is my faith tells me that Jesus is my savior, that God is real, this Bible is real. What does it say for me about being a woman? And it causes her to have to question some things that she's accepted as reality for a very long time. But the more that she questions it and starts to follow what she knows the scripture is telling her to do, the more peace she finds in it, the more comfort she finds in living a life where she's not fighting with me. You know, we're not supposed to be against each other. We're supposed to be working together as a couple to represent Christ in both of our Christian faith together, not to be talking about whether or not she's making more money than I am, or I'm not making enough money and that she's better than me because she's making more money. As a matter of fact, something that we agreed on a few years ago was, let's give this a try, honey. We're just going to see if we can make it on me making the income and you take care of the children and the house. And if you want to make some money on the side doing something or whatever, just like Proverbs, was it Proverbs 31 talks about
Proverbs,
how
I love
she
it.
works
Yeah.
in her field and sells things and she makes stuff on the side. That's kind of the lifestyle we've been doing for 3 years. And even though I feel the financial pressure, I'm still in a better place than I ever was when I always used to, like my first wife and I, it was always about how you need to go to school while I'm working so you can make more money. And then maybe I can go to school and I'll make more money and we'll make more money. But then we didn't focus enough on our children and, you know, all the stuff that came from that. I sometimes I get on these rabbit trails and don't remember how I got here, but I know that it was important toward the part where why we're so sad is that we believe a lot of lies and they're affecting our lives in a negative way. And when we get back to some of these good values that are available to us, there are a lot of good traditions out there, but most of those traditions are founded in Christian roots or even in Jewish roots, from my experience. And I don't know much about Muslim ideologies and or teachings and things like that, but I've known some Muslim people that are decent people. So I always try to say that these traditions aren't necessarily bad, but when we get into everything's just being about myself, which is kind of what this argument is between men and women, we cause a lot of problems for ourselves. So what I was talking about that led me here was, as a man, I want to be the proper man for my wife and for my children. And if I'm working a job for somebody, I don't want to be just doing it as a people pleaser. I want to be doing a good job for my employer. And the crazy thing is I've found that a lot of times employers don't like that. I find that they're intimidated by me because they think I'm going to take their job for some reason. But it doesn't worry me as much as it used to when those bad things happen where employer gets rid of me because I feel like they're intimidated by me. Because the Lord still provides as long as I'm focusing the right way. So what we're going to do to fix all of these problems is that we're focusing on what do I need to do differently to be a part of the solution. And if I'm going to go around telling everybody that you need to vote for this guy or vote for that guy, but I'm still living a lifestyle that is destructive for me, for my family, and for my community, then I'm part of the problem. And it doesn't matter who I vote for. So one of the things about carnivore that's been wonderful is that it's helped me to be the better version of myself. It's helped me to see that if I keep bad things out of my diet, it makes my body better. If I'm able to keep bad things out of my life, like one of the things that I used to struggle with was pornography. I grew up in a world where pornography was on television when I turned it on at 8 years old. And anytime during the day, and you're like seeing full frontal nudity. And pornography magazines and stuff that were available when I was younger, I grew up thinking this is normal to want to look at and to be a part of this type of thing. But I found out throughout my life where that permeated my actions and going to topless clubs and dating strippers. And I mean, I got a background that I'm not too proud of, but it hurt me on the inside. All of these things damaged me in the long run. So that when I finally am with a woman that I love, my version of what is sexually right put a lot of pressure on a woman in my life to maybe do something that's not comfortable for them, and that distortion is detrimental. But since I've been able to walk away from that in my life, I'm able to think clearer about a lot of things. And it's like, I just want to see people enjoying the life that they have while they're here. And a lot of times chasing the pleasures of life lead us to where we're actually more miserable than we ever would have been without it.
Agreed. Well, and I have so much respect for your wife too, because I don't know how old your wife is.
She's 40.
But so she grew up in my era, and we grew up when it's women's rights and women need to be strong. And my mom worked outside the house. My mom was a nurse in the 60s and the 60s and 70s. And women, should work. And, she took a little bit of time off for us kids, but went back to work super quick. And that's, how it kind of was. And I used to be very women's rights-ish, and then married my husband, and then really dug into Christianity. Like I really came back to my faith, like really strong. And I realized that like I am submissive to my husband, and I'm sure I'll get some comments about that, and I really don't care. But it's like, it's like woman's job should, like, I hate to say this, but our most important job ever is to have children and to raise children on a godly path and to protect them and nurture them and love them and give them what they need to have a great start in life. And it's my husband's job to provide and to provide discipline and to provide a godly path. And, we have it great and we work really great as a team. And it's because we're all on the same page, and we're all on the same page because we do put God at the center of our life. I mean, it really is. It's what keeps us in that. Now, if somebody else wants to, they can do whatever they want, but this is what works for us. And this is what has kept us together as a family. There have been multiple times in our marriage that one of us could have walked away.
Yeah.
But because of God, we didn't,
Something I remember my sister-in-law saying once is that if you're moving toward God and she's moving toward God, you're coming closer to each other as you're doing that. When you're chasing after what you want, you're moving away from each other. And a lot of times what we want doesn't match what the Bible says that we should be pursuing. And as a man, I'm commanded to love my wife as Christ loved the church and give myself for her. One of the things that I used to have a struggle with is I wanted things. I wanted all kind of stuff. Whatever it was that would feed my desire at the moment. Now I don't have that craving for stuff anymore. My desire is to make sure that my wife has a home and that she feels comfortable, that she feels safe, that there's a roof over her head and there's food available, and that she doesn't have to worry. That's why I sometimes worry when I feel like I'm not living up to that. But then I also have to be like, okay, Lord, you said you would provide for me as long as I'm following you, that if I'm putting you first, that all of these things will be given to me. And anytime that I deviate from that, that's when my anxiety level rises. It's because I'm choosing to take it back on myself rather than having faith and doing the best I can with what I've got and moving forward and always trying to do the right things. as opposed to sitting around playing video games like I used to. Not that playing video games is necessarily bad, but it can become just as bad as any other habit that's bad for you, like doing drugs, where you start to do it way too much and then it has a negative effect on your life. Well, I kind of have to stay away from video games because I do have a tendency, just like everything else, I have a tendency to want more and more and more and more of it. I'm going for the things that I like. When I'm focused on what the Lord tells me that I'm supposed to do, and when I'm focused on others, something my brother told me just the other day when I was struggling with some of this stuff that has been really helpful, is that I used to pray a lot for the situation that I'm dealing with. And he reminded me, why don't you start praying for other people instead of praying for yourself all the time and see how it goes? And I've noticed that as I've been doing that, that anxiety lifts. And when that anxiety is not there, I can function better as a result of that. And if I can function better, then I'm usually doing things that are productive for me. But if I can't function because anxiety is shutting me down, that's just going to make my problem worse.
Exactly. I have a question. Do you and your wife do a devotion together? Do you guys have like a Bible study that you do? Do you guys try to get in the Word together?
Yes. As her diet changes, it's hopefully going to change some of her sleeping habits. A lot of times she's still asleep when I'm doing this, but my brother and my mother and a couple of other people, her mother also joins us on this now. And there's like a family member that lives up in Virginia, I believe, that's related to my brother's wife's family. And one other person that we get together on the phone, and it's like a 5 or 6 way call. And we go through the Bible together. We read a chapter, sometimes 2, because some of the Psalms are really short. We'll go Proverbs, Psalms, and Ecclesiastes, and we'll repeat those over and over. We'll read one from each of those in order. And when we get to the end of Ecclesiastes, we go back and start Proverbs again, and then go through Psalms and Ecclesiastes again. And then we read 2 from those. I'm sorry, one from one and one from another. And then we wind up going through them all. Then the other things we read is one from the Old Testament and one from the New Testament until we get all the way to the beginning and the end, so that we're kind of reading through the scriptures together. And then we pray together. But then on top of that, of course, we've got study with our church that we go to on Sunday. Like we have a worship service, and we have a Bible study after that. And then we have small groups that get together as well, which that's kind of new for me, but I found that to be very edifying, because now we got small groups of people getting together, and there's like conversation about the word that goes on. Whereas it's not what I'm used to, where I just sit and the pastor teaches and I take notes, and, we don't even know each other inside the church because there's so many people. That's kind of where my life is with it right now. And I watch a lot of stuff on YouTube. I like to listen to the different teachers and try to understand things. Like, even if they don't agree with things that I've grew up learning, I like to listen so I can understand what other people might be hearing and see what they think of it, and also challenge my own beliefs. Like I said before, I've been listening to some of what Michael Heiser talks about, and he's supposedly an expert at Jewish, the ancient Hebrew language, and he says some things about the translation that don't match things that I've always learned. And I struggle with those things, and I battle with those things in my mind, but I know that the Lord is eventually going to lead me to the right answer. But I just got to be careful not to be arrogant to say, I already got the answer, I don't need to listen to anybody else. And sometimes I'll listen to somebody and I'll think, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And then I keep listening, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, that's where he's getting off the path. And then I'll realize that it's taking me in the wrong direction. And then I'll find somebody else to investigate. I like a lot of the things that Chuck Missler teaches, and I'll listen to his teaching. Ever since I heard Robert Downey Jr. was interested in that, I thought, well, that's interesting. What is it about him that found a pastor interesting? And then I listened to his teaching about how the sciences that we've grown up learning are basically, we've been taught a faith that's not actually science, whether it was about astronomy or what do you call it when they're dealing with the micro level? There's a name for it, quantum realm. Like he'll talk about the stuff that deals with quantum physics, and I'm like, whoa, man, this stuff is amazing. But
That's probably above my smarts level. I'm pretty smart when it comes to like medical stuff, but once you get to there's certain topics it's above my pay grade.
Yeah. Well, I like to listen to some of the different
Yeah.
aspects of it because it does open you up to realize a lot of the lies we've been told in our secular training that
Hmm.
when you start to dig deep at it, you realize that that's what they are. They're lying to you because they
Yeah.
have faith in what they believe, and what they believe is, I don't believe it's true.
Yeah. We've been going through something called the Bible recap as a family. Have you heard of it?
No.
It's written by Tara Lee Cobble. I'm looking at the book, Tara Lee Cobble. But it's a really it basically it goes through the Bible chronologically. You're supposed to do it in a year, but there is just no way that our family could ever get through it in a year, just because he's gone half the time, and we try to do it together as a family. So we just go through it chronologically. So you're jumping around between Samuel and Chronicles, going and Kings. So because they're all happening right around the same
Yeah.
time. So you're jumping around in there. Plus Psalms is thrown in there because some of the Psalms were written in that time frame. So we've been doing that as a family. And that's really, we're getting the kids involved really well because our kids are 17. And so one of them will read the recap and the other one will write down the answers to the questions, and then they'll quiz us to see if we were listening. And, so that's how we've been doing it. And then we obviously pray together as a family and stuff like that. And me and my husband also pray together like every day. So that's how we've been trying to do it.
That's good. Yeah, probably one of the areas that I have a weakness in is praying with other people and trying to encourage my children to pray more. And I admit that I don't have it all down perfect, but
None of
it's
us do.
it's
If
definitely
anybody
where I
says that
find
they,
the answers.
yeah, if anybody says that they have it perfect, they're lying.
No doubt about that.
And that's a commandment. Thou shalt not lie.
I didn't think we were going to get more than 30 minutes out of this because I didn't want to. I don't know. I didn't know what to expect. I just felt like what we were going to say wasn't going to go against a lot of what the carnivore community already accepts.
No.
The only thing that's really different from what
Yeah.
I believe about our ancestral eating is the numbers, the amount, how
Yeah.
long we've been on
The
the earth.
times. Yeah.
And there's different versions of creationists out there. I
Mhm.
believe creation theory, whatever it might be, it may not be the way some creationists think of it. Some people think
Mhm.
of the old earth mentality, some think of a new earth
No,
mentality.
yeah.
I don't know which one's right and which one's wrong. I just know that God's telling us the truth about what I read in the Bible. It's just a matter
Yeah.
of digging the truth out of it, because some of it gets lost in translation, and it takes time to understand. But then also, we got to be able to let go of our preconceived notions about things. So many times we
Yeah.
can't learn because our cup's already full with what we think we know about stuff. And it makes it
Yeah.
impossible to learn anything if you already think you know everything.
Exactly. So, but yeah, it has been a blast having you on. I definitely enjoyed this, and I've hoped that everybody that's listening and tuning in is enjoyed this. Um, if you're on my channel watching this and you have not subscribed to at Ferrigno Freedom, head on over to his channel and make sure you like and subscribe. And anybody on his channel that would like to, subscribe to mine, it's at Rebecca Bavery. CPHS stands for Certified Primal Health Coach. So yeah, you can head on over there, and yeah, I can't wait to hopefully one day meet you in person. I'm hoping that when we do they said that they are going to have a premiere for the documentary at the Monticello uh, theater, that Carrie owns. So that'll be super awesome.
Where does he live again? I forget. Like Wisconsin or something, right?
Wisconsin, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I think it is too. Yeah.
So, but they're going to have like a legit premiere red carpet type thing, I think.
I know I saw an announcement because I keep in touch with Robin from the Hack
Oh
Your Health
yeah.
group, that they're going to be doing the Hack Your Health event next year in Tampa. which is just 2 hours drive from me. And after this year, I didn't even make it to the airport. I'm kind of glad.
What dates was that? What date? It's in September next year, right?
Let me see. I got it somewhere here.
I think it's Montello, Wisconsin. Thank you. Who's your carnivore? I appreciate that. I think it's in September this year.
Wait a minute. No, okay, wait. We should share. So I'm already sharing this early. He talked about sharing this information on September 5th. So you're getting too much information here already. Let me see. It's going to be in November next year. So we got a bit of a ways away. November
what, for
of 2025 for the actual Hack Your Health event. Wait a minute.
No.
Ticket sales are opening in September of this year, but the event itself will be in November of 25. I'm reading it right here from my contact over there.
Okay. Super cool. Because our report date for our next duty station is August 10th. So hopefully we'll be moved, and hopefully it'll be on the continental United States and I can go. Because
so you don't know yet either, then. That's basically what they're doing.
Welcome to the United States Army. So my husband is he made the Sergeant Major Academy list. So he is in the Sergeant Major Academy right now, and he will find out in October what positions are open. And then in December, they will let us know where we are going.
Okay. Well, I guess all I was trying to say is because it's so close by to me, I'll definitely be at Hack Your Health.
You'll be there. Yeah. So hopefully we'll be here.
I have a hard time getting on a plane ever since the TSA whole thing took over years ago. It's been like, I don't even want to get on a plane anymore. I don't like what I see going on. I don't like getting in that doggone machine and feeling like they're zapping me with something. You know, I'm a conspiracy nut. I hate it all.
I used to be able to fly and I loved it. And then now the older I get the more nervous I get about flying.
Well, also because the whole thing you hear about Boeing having all these problems with their maintenance issues. Yeah. And I see the workforce is generally not really focused on quality anymore. And maintenance is hugely important. When I was at the Westin Peachtree Hotel in Atlanta the last time, I remember being there, and the restaurant at the top of the hotel was called the Sundial, and it rotated. Every hour you could sit in the restaurant and you could see the entire city of Atlanta if you sat there. And there's an elevator that takes you to the top of the hotel that's on the outside of the building. It's in a glass elevator. And it was like, oh my gosh, 74 floors on an outside of the building elevator. It takes your breath away. But when I rode it back in the 90s, I didn't feel like it was going to fall down, and the restaurant worked fine. Last time I went back, the first when we checked into the hotel, we went into the room and it looked like a prostitute had already been in there and done their thing and left, like there was clothing behind and something that was dumped out of a purse. And we're like, okay, so they're not paying attention to what's in the room when we go in there. And then I realized they didn't have a whole lot of staff doing maintenance. We got up to the hotel, to the restaurant, and the machine, it didn't work anymore. It didn't spin. And I thought, now how in the world did they let that fall into such disrepair that doesn't work anymore? And if they did that, what about the elevator, that I got to ride on the outside of the building? It just gives me a lot of pause with what's going on with all of our man-made equipment. Yeah. If people aren't taking their jobs seriously. And then you hear that they're hiring people for flying the plane based on the color of their skin. Look, man, I want somebody who knows how to fly. That is the only prerequisite.
That should be it. That should be it. So have you passed your license?
Traveling.
Yeah, it makes I get a little scared too. But yeah.
So but at the same time, I have faith that God's going to get me wherever I need to be. So I'll probably get in the plane anyway. But I know my wife, she looks at that stuff and she's like, I don't trust them, and I don't want to be up there in their hands.
I don't know if you listen to Southern Gospel. I grew up I grew up listening to Southern gospel music, and the Nealons. I listened to the Rex Nealon singers, is what they were. Just recently, the entire Nealon family, almost except for one daughter, um, they were on a plane headed to Alaska to get on the Alaskan cruise, and the plane crashed, and they all died. And so only one of them was left. So I have a little bit of a fear of flying now. I know that was a smaller like puddle jumper, but still that scares me.
Well, even a story like that kind of reminds me that I'm not supposed to be afraid of that. Death is a part of life. That's what we're expected. And the Lord's not going to be surprised about the day that I'm going to die. He already knows when it's going to happen. So as a believer, I should be able to have the confidence, but I don't have confidence in man. And I make that excuse a lot of times for why I let anxiety get on my heart, is that I don't always have confidence in myself. That it's not that I don't believe God's going to do it for me. It's that I don't believe I'm always doing the right thing, and that I second guess myself and have doubts. But when you bring up a story like that, it just makes me realize God wasn't surprised by the fact that that family died together. And if death is the worst thing in the world, it's a shame we're all going to face the worst thing in the world. But as a believer, I know death means I'm going to be face to face with God. I'm going to be in heaven, because he promised that if you believe in his son, that's where you're going to be. He wants you to be with him. And that's the reason why he made that available. So it's like, just rest in that, Dante. Now, when it comes to gospel music, I grew up loving heavy metal and rock music. It really was hard for me to adjust to some of the gospel music I would listen to, and singing hymns was never my favorite thing. I always felt like I was faking it when I would listen. And most of the Christian music out there, I didn't really like. Even Stryper, I liked Stryper back in the day, you know, the heavy metal Christian band. But it was like, is this for real? Are they really? I don't know. But I've heard some of the recent stuff, and I was like, okay, it's good that the words are all exactly what they should be. But I've gotten to where I guess I've outgrown some of the heavy metal music. I still like Metallica and stuff like that, which I find is funny that the words in Metallica almost sound like they're scriptural.
Some of them. Skillet. I am a Skillet fan.
But when it comes to gospel music, I do have a favorite. And a lot of people may not have heard of him. It's Chris Hennessy. Chris Hennessy used to be, he was a band member with Jamie Johnson. And I found out about him because I went to see Jamie Johnson live. Now, a lot of people haven't heard of Jamie Johnson. These are people who told the country music executives to go jump in a river. I'm not changing what I'm doing for you. I'm not going to follow the corporate mentality that's ruining, has already ruined Hollywood, that is now ruining the country music scene, something I grew to appreciate country music later in the 90s. But, you called Jamie Johnson kind of outlaw country for today. And when I went to see Jamie Johnson live, we saw Chris Hennessy there. I was like, who is this? I love his music. And he's got a number of songs that are like the Saint and the Sinner and Daddy's Song and a number of things. Or even he's got one called Gospel Music that I just love, because it's more of a guy he's a musician and he loves the Lord. And this is what came of it. He wasn't trying to write necessarily a gospel piece of music. It's just what came out of his heart, and the way it sounds to me is beautiful, and I love it. But
I'll look him up.
It's rare for me to find something that falls into the gospel territory that I enjoy listening to. But, that's something that I've been on a walk with God on for a while now too, where I'm starting to try to embrace the praise factor of being a Christian that I didn't grow up with. I mean, I grew up in a church where we were a bit more like a college classroom setting in the way that I grew up studying. And it was all very academic discipline type of thing. Not a lot of people saying amen and all that stuff. I grew up thinking that was like, you're making it about yourself when you do that stuff, and you're distracting other people from hearing the message. Well, I've been more open to the praise and worship and the lifting of hands and trying to understand, because I can see where the Apostle Paul talked about it. If we seem like we're crazy to you when we're praising, that's because we're just in love with what God's doing. But then he would stop and preach the word. And as I study that stuff, it challenges me to be willing to try something that's a little different than what I grew up being used to in my tradition, because I want to find what the Lord has. And if his scripture says that I'm supposed to give praise like that, and then I'm singing songs as a part of that, then I want to be a part of that. It's tough on me because I like, if you're in my car, my kids call it Dante FM. when they're in the car with me, they're either going to hear 90s outlaw country or 80s music for the most part. And it's going to be rock or something from the 80s scene back when everything was androgynous and probably not the healthiest, words for your life. But, and that's natural. People love what they grew up listening to. So I don't ever like, my children, their favorite music is stuff I go, I don't know who that is or what that is. It sounds weird to me, but I understand that has meaning to you because it's this formative time in your life when you're listening to it. So it's hard to switch those gears. But when I found Chris Hennessy, I was like, man, now that's really good stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to look it up. Because
Hennessy like Tennessee. That's actually the name of one of his albums. So it's spelled like Tennessee with an H. It's spelled like Tennessee, but with an H instead of a T.
Isn't there a beer called Hennessy, or is it a bourbon?
Cognac called Hennessy, and it ends with a Y instead of two E's. Like
okay, never mind. But see, I can tell I never drank it.
Yeah, I drink a good bit of it.
All right, well, we're at 2 hours, and yeah. Is the lead singer of Twisted Sister a Christian?
I don't know if Dee Snider is or not, but I know Alice Cooper is, which was a surprise.
He is now. Him and the guy from Korn.
Yeah. A couple of them, I think, from Korn
have converted. Yeah. They have some pretty remarkable stories too. But that's for another time.
Yeah. Well, I think anytime somebody comes to faith, the more crazy their past was, the more interesting the story is, because God is so graceful.
Well, Kat Von D. I'm a tattoo fan, so I've got tattoos like all over, and Kat Von D. And I was like, oh my gosh, because she used to be in like all kinds of. I think it might have been into witchcraft. She was into something kind of crazy, and I just recently saw that where she had converted, and I was like, oh my gosh. Like,
yeah. I think the tattoo thing is kind of cultural. When I was growing up, I remember when I was real young, it was like only sailors had tattoos and, gangsters and stuff like that. And then later it kind of became cool to have tattoos. And that's when I got all of mine. I got several of them as well. But I'm not really proud of them because I got them in a time period when I was really rebellious and I was wanting to look cool. And that was kind of why I followed that route. But I'm not really ashamed of them either. I just don't want them to distract from somebody who's seeking the truth that gets all caught up on legalism to be like judgmental and not be able to listen to something I'm saying because they see my tattoos. I'm not really afraid to hide them either. I mean, to wear, like, I'll wear tank tops because they're there. I just live with them. I call them permanent reminders of temporary feelings.
But this is the one I get the most questions about that one. And
I'm not that good at reading the Greek letters, but I recognize them.
It is agape.
Okay.
So my husband had a Greek soldier that he worked with that I made sure to make sure it was correct. So it didn't say something crazy. But yeah, so this is agape. And so it's a big conversation starter.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that too. I have one on my chest that's in Chinese that means justice. If anybody's ever seen it.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of us hunger for justice. That's why we like the anti-heroes and the Punisher and the people that go mete out some justice. But at the same time, I'm thankful that God didn't give me justice sometimes, because he would have eliminated me a long time ago if I got what I deserved.
Yeah, what I deserve is pretty bad. So, but grace and mercy.
Thank God for it. I thank God for it. I don't deserve it. None of us deserve it. If we're honest with ourselves, none of us deserve the grace that God gives us, but it is so wonderful when you live in it and when you realize it. Thank you,
Yes,
God.
absolutely.
Well, I
Yeah.
appreciate you having me come on
No,
your channel and having
no,
this
thank
discussion.
you.
I had no
You
idea it was going to go like this long and all over the place, but it did.
No, it's been a great conversation, and I appreciate you so much. Yeah, so everybody go subscribe to him if you're on my channel. Everybody knows you though, I think. So
You know what? I haven't gotten used to that. I really don't think of it that way. I'm just a
I
regular
know
guy.
you don't.
And
That's what makes you special though, because you are not big-headed.
well,
And there's some out there that
I think
are.
it's because I know I have a tendency to be. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a movie star and all that stuff. And I know that if I'd have got involved in Hollywood early on, I would have been
Oh,
I would have been the disaster that poor Corey Feldman and Corey Haim became. If you know their stories, it's very sad. But
it
I
is
would
very
have got
sad.
caught up in all that stuff and probably got wrenched around and beat up. And it's weird today because like people I've worked with would talk about me being a celebrity in a way, and I'm like, I just have a YouTube channel. From my perspective, growing up is you got to have movies or something to be a celebrity. But in their world, somebody with 70,000 subscribers or more, that's
It's yeah,
kind of a celebrity. And I think I consider it a responsibility that if I'm going to have these people watching, I better be telling them the truth. I better be
yep.
sharing as much of the truth as I can, even if it's focused on the diet or when I have these wonderful opportunities to share my faith with people as well.
Mhm.
I'm just going to be open about who I am, and even with all my flaws, I'm
Mhm.
thankful for what God has given me and the opportunity to have this way of eating change my life, the opportunity to have an opportunity to reach out to people spiritually. I've had people contact me about faith they claim to be atheists, but they want to know what God's about, or you know, the fact that I've been blessed with that opportunity to be able to be a positive motivator in somebody's life toward things that
Mhm.
are going to lead them to real happiness in life, in eternal life. I don't deserve that opportunity, but yet I have it. So I'm thankful for that.
And
And I'm
yet
thankful for all
it
of
is
the
our
people that are here. Go ahead.
it is our it is the Great Commission.
Absolutely.
So
Well, it's I have the hardest thing is doing all the YouTube stuff that we have to do, asking people to like and subscribe and all those things. But I'm
yes.
starting to realize that it's something that you got to do once in a while, and especially when I have somebody on the show. How many subscribers do you have right now?
I had at the beginning with like I was 663.
Okay,
So
so
I'm a little channel.
right, you're right at the beginning, and I know what it's
Yeah.
like to have been there. So I encourage the people on my channel. If you like what you heard her say today, and you're willing to watch more of her videos, please go and subscribe, and then watch those videos. This is the important thing I like to remind people of. When you just subscribe and you don't watch the videos, you actually do more harm than good, because YouTube algorithm is looking at the fact that your subscribers aren't even watching your stuff. So if you're going to watch it, if you're interested to hear more of what she's got to say, please go and subscribe and like the videos that you see. Take the time to click off the thing and hit the like button and all that stuff,
Yeah.
but watch them, you know?
Yeah. Exactly.
That's what helps if you want to get more people talking about the things that you want to. If you hear what we're saying is what you want to hear more people hearing, then that's how you help us. So I
Yeah.
appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, Rebecca. And I
Absolutely.
hope that it does bring you enough to where you get over that 1,000 threshold that you
Oh,
need to be at.
that would be nice. But, it's on God's time, and like I said,
Absolutely.
I'm going back to school to be a nurse practitioner. So, my goal is not necessarily to be a YouTube star. It is to teach people about health, and that's what you'll find on my channel. A lot
Right.
of stuff like I do recipes and stuff because I come up with quirky things like crab cakes, like carnivore crab cakes. And then, but then I also teach about diabetes and thyroid because that's my passion. So
I love it.
that's what you'll find over there. So thank you, Dante. And we will see you guys next time. Bye,
Thanks for
guys.
being here, everybody.